Thank you so much for joining us. I'm very honored to introduce to you Chris Evans. Chris is our EVP and practice leader of Safe by Choice for us globally. Chris, thank you so much for your time today and looking forward to having a great conversation with you.
Yeah, me too. Great to be with you, Alex.
Now, Chris, to begin, can you just explain the importance of investing in a safety culture within workplaces and how can it benefit both employees and organizations?
Yeah, I would love to. So, I think the answer to this question always has to be anchored in the organization's context, right? So, organizations that we're partnering with to build really great positive safety cultures always have kind of their unique reasons for it, right? That's anchored in their values and their data. But if I kind of zoom out and go, what are the general categories that organizations are looking at, particularly right now? Because I think 10 years ago, the answer to this question was different, right? The answer to this question was mainly about, lost time injury and cost recovery, which is still a big part of why you would invest in your safety culture. I think as we think about some of the shifts that are going on in supply chain organizations today around the globe, in addition to that kind of obvious base, we want people to be safe. It costs money when they're not safe. Let's reduce that. I would say we're seeing really three things that are really driven as we kind of emerge out of a very disruptive 3 or 4 years. So the first is the need for more resilient, agile supply chains. And that those supply chains, right, the culture that is operating within them, if it's very rigid and very compliance driven, it's really hard for those organizations to move at the pace they need to and adapt their supply chains in a way that is safe. I think the second is around employee experience. And I think, we're definitely seeing that as organizations deepen their values, right? And that value of caring for employees' safety is a powerful way to demonstrate that. And when you are able to build your culture in a way that's really empowering for those employees, it creates a better employee experience. It's going to reduce labor relations issues. It's going to reduce absenteeism. It's going to reduce turnover. It's going to help be a key part of that employee experience that's creating value, right? As globally labor markets get more and more competitive. And then I'd say the third thing we're seeing, right, is as a reason for it is actually, if you think about expanding the definition of your safety culture just around physical safety, it's actually the same behaviors to develop that social safety and the psychological safety and the emotional safety. And as organizations take a more holistic view of the employee and what does it look like to do that, right? A good safety culture program links and helps enable their DEI or DEIB strategy in terms of that social safety and belonging. It helps advance, like in really practical, meaningful ways, the concept of psychological safety down into the behaviors of the organization. And so I'd say those three things, as we're working with kind of what I would consider leading organizations globally, in addition to that base obvious safety case, are increasingly what we're seeing.
So, Chris, we've been running Safe by Choice globally for well and truly over a decade now. What is Safe by Choice all about?
Yeah. So, Alex, I think every organizational culture transformation always has to be a partnership, and the approach has to be tailored to what makes sense in their context. But I would say generally, if you think about a methodology of how we would approach that and work with them, and then the tools that we would bring to bear in that partnership. So from a methodology standpoint, it really starts with understanding current reality in terms of what's the safety data telling us, what's the cultural data telling us, and what are the pain points and aspirations of the executive team that's ultimately got to lead this culture transformation. From there, it's about getting the executives aligned in terms of what do they mean by a positive safety culture. We obviously are able to bring languages and process and tools to bear with that, but ultimately the body follows the head in a culture. And so the executives really have to figure out what is it they're committed to and willing to hold themselves, their line managers, their employees accountable. So that's step one, step two. From there, it's then activating those two things. And there's really two components to everyone. And this is where we bring our expertise in experiential learning and behavior change in terms of how do you empower and really activate that line manager who's going to be 70% of determining the behaviors at the front line in terms of how they model those behaviors, coach those behaviors, and require them. And then how do you engage and onboard all employees into that new safety culture in a way that is authentic, inspiring, and achievable fundamentally. And the way we do those two things is typically through a high quality experiential learning program that can be typically classroom based, but also done virtually or through a leader cascade methodology. And that really depends on who that field population is. And what are the kind of trade-offs in terms of getting out to that population from a cost standpoint, from a labor relations standpoint, and from a logistics standpoint. And then if you think around that, that we typically with a client will see a lot of benefit within 6 to 9 months. And that's actually what we call the danger zone in a culture transformation, right? Because it's where everybody's like, oh, this is great. We're getting momentum. We can go focus on the next thing. And that's a guaranteed way to end up with flavor of the month. So if you think around that activation program, there's really 4 critical, important aspects. The first is sustainment and application, right? What happens after you get that momentum to really embed it into the organizational culture? And that's typically tools for leaders, some form of digital reinforcement, ongoing application guides, and figuring out what those next set of behaviors are in the maturity of both the line manager and the employee. Communication and recognition is the second piece around that model, absolutely critical in terms of embedding it into the organization, keeping people updated, what's going well, what we're having to adapt to, and recognizing the right folks at the front line and kind of building those heroes that ultimately become the markers in the culture. Measurement is critical. Typically in organizations, they measure a lot around safety in terms of lost time injuries and other aspects like that. What's often missing in that data set and not packaged in a way that the executives can track that on a monthly and quarterly basis, like they track financial health, is some of the leading indicators behaviorally in terms of like the proactivity they want in the culture and some of those leadership and employee behaviors and attitudes. So typically that 4th piece helps maintain the focus for those 2 to 3 years. And then finally, this is a lot of work. So I say it's a partnership almost always, right? There's going to be corporate functions that have to engage in this, from safety to HR to communications. And those functions typically are all have jobs. So sometimes it'll be redeploying assets to be able internally to be able to focus on this for 2 to 3 years. And sometimes it's you need to, we Eagles Flight are providing that kind of temporary person with the expertise to manage it through. But if you were to think about a 3-year culture journey, that's typically what that model looks like. And then the organization, if I think about our great partnerships, right, we have a couple that are going on 10, 11 years right now. After that 3-year period, you've really gotten it into the DNA of the organization and you've gotten the commitment. So now it's okay, what does it look like from a sustainment standpoint for onboarding people into this really positive, healthy culture? And that's typically where the organization's doing the majority of that work and just using us to help. And that's what a safe by choice deployment would look like.
Chris, you mentioned something really interesting then, and you mentioned that part of the methodology is having a top-down approach. Why is it important that it's a top-down approach rather than, working with line managers? They're the ones that are on the ground. They're the ones working with the people on the tools. Why do we need to go top down?
Yeah. And I think for clarity, Alex, from the experience of the people working in the organization, it actually needs to feel like a both and, right? A top down and a bottom up. When we've done this in different organizations, right? Getting that frontline engagement, oftentimes they're in unionized environments where you're engaging the union, you're engaging those key representatives, and it's both a top down and bottom up is really the key to how people experience it. What I would say in our experience, the reason why having the executive leadership fully engaged, really important for 2 reasons. First of all, if you think about ultimately those are the folks that have to define success and allocate the resources. And if they're not engaged in the process, you have a ton of execution risk in terms of the behaviors being modeled, it being seen as a corporate priority, and it being resourced appropriately to actually get a culture transformation and not just have it be a flavor of the month program. So I would say that really critical. I think the second reason it's critically important is less about de-risking failure and more about the powerful opportunity that comes when organizational leaders really demonstrate a commitment to a positive safety culture. And I would say there's probably no more powerful program, behavior, activity corporate leaders can take than really demonstrating care for their people through the safety culture that happens. So when we think about how do we actually get executives to do that, it's things like every time you visit a site, right, we're giving you a set of activities that, yes, they're about the activities, but it's about modeling the behavior. Like drop in on the health and safety committee meetings, right? Do Gamba walks or floor walks or site walks, right? And actually have your hard hat on, live in the shoes of the people that you're leading that way, and do it in a way that is modeling not just safety for safety's sake, but actually that we care so much that we get this right, that you are both safe and that you have a great work experience while being safe. And I find when organizational leaders do that really effectively, there's probably no more powerful way to show that I care as a leader. And that powerful care, right, is going to have all of those benefits we talked about in the first answer when you get it right, of better engagement from your employees, better engagement from your line managers, greater voice, right? I'm creating that environment as a leader where people are like, they really care. And therefore, I have a voice in safety, and it's not a complaint voice, it's a help move the organization forward voice. And when you get that through the engagement of senior executives, it's powerful.
So Chris, there are a plethora of other safety training programs out there. What makes Safe by Choice so special or actually brings a benefit to organizations?
Yeah, so if I think about this kind of globally, the space around safety and safety training, they typically fall into two categories. So let me take your answer in two parts. There's kind of technical safety training, right? Lockout procedures, working at heights, whatever industry you're in, there's understanding technically how to be safe. These are really important foundational elements. They're not what Eagle's Flight does. That's not really our specialty. If I think about the second part, which is what gets referred to as the behavior-based or safety culture programs, these are the programs that help ensure higher level adoption of all of these technical safety programs. So that's really where we fit. There's a couple of other folks that are out there doing great work. They're based on different aspects. I would say what typically our clients say sets our program apart is three things. The first is we're very pragmatic, right? We realize that if it doesn't make sense at the front line for the employee and the line manager, and they don't understand it, doesn't matter how good the theory is behind the program. So we're intensely pragmatic. The second is experiential learning, right? We believe that to change behavior, you've got to build conviction, then provide that really pragmatic knowledge, and then help turn that into skill. Well, to build that conviction, people actually have to have experiences where I learn by doing. I actually see something that simulates my real world in a fun, psychologically safe way. I see how I behaved, and I see that if I behave differently, I could get a superior result. And that helps build that internal conviction to adopt the new behaviors. So that experiential learning tool set, we're one of the global leaders in. And I'd say it's probably the core thing that we bring different to a program like this. And then I'd say the third thing that our clients say set us apart is that we will truly partner, right? That while you have to understand the principles that determine success, you also have to adapt in the field to the pragmatic realities of what does deployment actually look like for this organization. And I think if you think about those three things, pragmatic, experiential, and partnership adaptability, that's really what folks would say to me is why they partner with Eagle's Flight and why they partner with us over the other folks that are out there doing safety culture or behavior-based safety programs.
So Chris, how do we measure success when we implement Safe by Choice in an organization?
Yeah. So measurement is critical, Alex, both in terms of demonstrating that we achieved what we set out to do, as well as keeping people engaged throughout the process. If you think about a scorecard, right, we're always going to start with the business metrics the business cares about, right? So this is typically a collaboration with the senior operating executive, the finance executive, and the safety executive, and increasingly the HR executive, to really nail down what's the business benefit we're looking for. Typically, it's going to be four things. Your safety measures, right, in terms of lost time injury, and particularly, any lost time injuries that have, what we would call kind of critical elements to it, right? Loss of limb, loss of life, and major costs around that. That's typically one of the business outcomes we're looking at. For a lot of organizations, though, that's a de-risking because they're not actually that bad in that area, right? It's not like there's a massive improvement there. So then if we kind of drill down, the second set of business outcomes we're looking for are typically fall into, things that demonstrate the proactivity of employees, near miss reporting, better suggestions for process improvement and tool improvement for safety at the front lines. And typically here, what we're looking for, if you think about the shift in the culture, is that we could see tangible benefits in the front line of not EHS coming in and telling people how to be safe, but employees and line managers working up through the ops and EHS, telling the organization how they can improve safety results and productivity results. And then typically there's some other downstream benefits that are associated with it in the business outcome, quality, labor relations stats around turnover or complaint incidents, things like that. So we would start by building kind of those are the business outcomes we're looking for. And then we would work backwards up the scorecard. So the next kind of line, right, that's predictive of those is, are we seeing the behaviors in the culture, right? And then we would move out to, are we seeing the behaviors of the leaders that are going to associate with those behaviors in the culture? And then we would move out, and this is where the real leading indicators come in terms of our ability to track and maintain engagement in the program, right? Which is, are people completing the training? When they complete the training, are they giving a high intent to apply? Are they identifying obstacles to application kind of right out of the training that are getting escalated up to that team? So that set of measures, if you think about working backwards from the business outcome, is typically how we work with the internal team to build the scorecard to make sure that we work towards success.
So, Chris, can you tell us about a client that has implemented Safe by Choice? What were some of the outcomes and what were their experience in implementing Safe by Choice throughout their organization?
Yeah. So we had a Fortune 100 pharma company, the manufacturing division. Their senior executive team came to us about 3 years into a safety culture journey. They had done some great work at the foundational elements, but really realized there were a couple of missing pieces in terms of translating their safety culture aspirations into tangible results at the front line. And in 8 of their sites particularly, they were actually in what I would call, approaching a critical level, both in terms of safety outcomes, but also in terms of the labor relations around safety. So they really approached us to say, okay, great, we feel there's some missing components. How can we partner together? And we partnered together to do a 4-phase global deployment. And if you think about the benefits that they got, they had a scorecard, and I'll talk through the scorecard in a second. But the first immediate problem they had to solve was really getting these 8 sites out of the red zone in terms of labor relations and safety outcomes. And that's a difficult challenge, right? They then wanted to improve the overall safety culture and all the benefits, and I'll kind of reference those. But we were able to come in, do a really focused discovery and design both a partnership program that was going to be able to be rolled out globally in multiple languages, as well as target those 8 sites. And like any type of initiative like this, right, you're you're melting, what my colleague Sue Wigston calls the permafrost to get going there. It's not an easy endeavor, and it's got some challenges with it. At that probably the most difficult site in those 8s, when I tell this story, right? The key in how we knew we were successful, and I'll talk you through some of the stats in a second, but the way we knew we were successful is that when that site hit 1 million hours without a lost time incident, 1 million working hours, it was actually the frontline workers through their labor reps and the kind of managers on that site, not corporate, that set the goal to say, let's go for 2 million in terms of lost time incidents. And so, we, if you think about, as we rolled that out globally in multiple languages to 50 different sites, I think when we were kind of moving into the sustainment phase, that kind of first 4 phases was almost 30,000 people. They had seen a 61% reduction in lost time incidents, 31% reduction in total incidents, which is good because that's showing the safety benefits coming down. They'd also, in that same period of time, seen a 64% increase in near-miss reporting and suggestions from employees, and had implemented at all of the sites a discipline process to track how those were being responded against, so that you were going to see that number continue to grow because employees felt that they had a voice. So there's kind of the big corporate data in terms of how we knew we were successful there, but the stories that, as a team and their executive team just were really, really impressed by and knew it was working, is when you can actually go to a site and see that there's folks there that, because of the collaborative approach, right, have gone, we're going to own safety in terms of not like some ethereal thing, we're going for 2 million hours. And that to me is the stories that really get us excited.
So Chris, Eagle's Flight has been around for over 3 decades, and we are the experts in leadership and team building and communication. Why safety? Why Safe by Choice? The
origin story, Alex, of Safe by Choice actually came from a very unique partnership. There was a resource extract company that was part of a 3-way partnership that had a massive safety issue, made the news, got regulators from 3 different jurisdictions involved in really leaning into why did this happen and what would be required to prevent it. And very early on, it became obvious to everybody that, these organizations, the 3 of them, all 3 had, world-class technical safety training and world-class compliance just out of the nature of what they did. And what the root cause when they kind of did that analysis was, yeah, but the culture in our organization isn't actually strong enough to translate those, best-in-class technical safety requirements and compliance mechanisms into the type of results we need at the front line. And we actually need to fix our culture. And we had really great relationships with the senior executives. They gave us 3 of their top safety people to kind of co-design the original program that was for theirs. Obviously, it's kind of, modified and adapted. We're a learning organization, so we learn as we go. But that kind of core collaboration in resource extraction, right, was a very, very unique challenge behaviorally, because it's just a different environment. And so that's how we got into it. And kind of often when I'm having these conversations with senior folks, it's, if you can do safety there across the world, you can do safety anywhere. It's so it birthed out. We had all the various components in terms of design and experiential learning and pragmatic approach, and they had really deep technical domain expertise in safety. And when the 2 kind of got together, it was a really powerful collaboration that we then went, and this can help a lot of other organizations globally.
Chris, thank you so much for joining us in this video. We have loved learning more about Safe by Choice.
My pleasure, Alex.